All right, thank you for joining the Realty One Stop Mastermind group. Tonight, we're going to be talking about how to find and put together some creative deals. So creative financing or just kind of different strategies outside of your typical, on market, MLS listed and traditional financing or commercial financing. So I've had a handful of experiences with these types of deals as a buyer and as a seller. So I've seen kind of both sides of it. And I think in the market that we're in today, it is more important than ever to understand some of these tactics and be able to utilize them as you guys are looking for your next deals. It's, as we know, we're looking at anywhere from 7 to 8% interest rates right now across most products. So it's exceedingly difficult to make deals make sense and to get them to work. And I think, again, it's more important than ever to kind of understand some of these things, especially when you're looking at the next, let's call it 24 months, where some of these sellers, especially in like commercial space and in commercial multifamily, are going to have situations where they have to sell, whether that's the 1031, whether that's notes that are expiring or ballooning, or rate locks, or they have a 3 or 4% rate lock, and all of a sudden it's going to adjust up to 7-8%. There's going to be situations where if you are effective at utilizing some of these tools, you're going to be able to get deals that you may not otherwise be able to get, and that the majority of buyers may not be able to get. So again, I thought it was kind of timely with the way the market's going. And when we consider creative financing or any sort of creative structure to deals, at the end of the day, it's as simple as you're trying to create a structure that is hopefully win-win for everybody. But more often than not, there's a specific benefit for buyers and a specific benefit for sellers in structuring it this way. So the most common way is where you as a buyer have some sort of benefit, meaning whether it's terms or down payment or out-of-pocket cost, there's some sort of benefit for you as a buyer that makes creative financing make sense, or creative deal structure. And then for sellers, there's a myriad of reasons why they may be interested in doing it. So another reason why I want to talk about this tonight is I'm at the very early stages of buying a 40-unit deal. So I'm not going to go into too much minutia of the deal itself, because it's super early, and obviously I have no idea if we're going to close or not. But I do want to talk about some of the creative structure around why this deal came up, and why we're working through potentially buying it. So again, I don't want to overcomplicate this. I think it, I hear a lot of other investors talk about this, and podcasters and things like that. And it's like, I think it can make creative financing seem like this big, overwhelming, daunting, complicated task, and it really doesn't have to be. At the end of the day, in most cases, someone is putting the money into a deal, whether that's you, a partner, partners, or the seller is financing the deal to you. That's typically all that this means. That's going to be somewhat different than like a traditional commercial or conventional financing. So I'll run through some of the kind of big topics here, and I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with this, and people who follow real estate are probably familiar with this. But seller financing is the most common, so we're going to talk a lot about that. There's a lot of other ways to bring money to the deal. Again, we talked about partnerships, joint ventures, syndications. Those are other ways you can raise money for a deal that's not necessarily all of your own capital. You can use self-directed IRAs. You can get private lending. So I've talked about that before in this group. I have a couple deals right now that are doing super heavy rehabs, where I bought the property with cash, and then I got a private lender to finance the rehabs on both of those deals. So that keeps my capital in the bank that I can either use for other projects or other deals, and it allows me to give a return to my private lenders. So that's one way to be a little bit more fluid in this market as a buyer. And think about it like this, where when bank rates are 7-8%, there's a lot of people out there with money who are willing to take a return like that, especially if it's like, recourse debt, meaning you're personally liable, and it's collateralized by an asset like real estate. It's about as safe as debt can get. And if they're going to get a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% return on that money, that's pretty attractive for a lot of people that have capital. So, again, private money is a obviously a very common piece of creative financing. You can do a master lease. Basically, the way that differentiates a little bit from a land contract or seller financing is that you're basically leasing the control over an asset with the option to purchase it at some point with whatever terms. Obviously, all those terms are flexible. So it's a little bit different than a land contract, but that's another thing you'll see. I mean, so a lease option is very simple, right? I own a couple lease option properties where my tenant has a 5-year option to exercise a purchase at a pre agreed upon price, right? Similar to that as a master lease option. But typically you see these master leases on like mid to large multifamily because for whatever reason, there's motivations from both sides to not go through, agency debt or some other sort of commercial financing. Obviously, you can do crowdfunding. That's become more and more popular. There's a lot of websites that are dedicated strictly to raising $5,000 or $10,000 from individual investors. I've never personally tried that model. If anybody has, feel free to chime in. I think it's a creative option. For me personally, it seems a little more complicated than it's worth. And if you're raising a ton of money, then you probably aren't gonna. It's probably not going to make sense when you're raising 5,000 or 10,000 at a time. That's why I've never personally looked at it. So, this is somewhat creative financing, but a home equity line of credit, this is one of my favorite tactics. I've used that on, this is the house I'm in now is the first primary residence I've had without a line of credit. And I plan on getting one as soon as we're done rehabbing it. So when we're done rehabbing it, I'll get it reappraised, get a line of credit. For anyone watching this later who may be unfamiliar with line of credit, it's basically like having access to capital, but it's the equity in your home. And the way they typically work is you're going to get a certain loan to value on the appraised value of your house. And the difference between that loan to value and the current mortgage, if you have one, is going to be the amount of line of credit that they give you. So, if you got a $200,000 house, you have a $100,000 mortgage. And like I don't know what they're at right now, but I know when I got one a few years ago, they were going up to like 95% loan to value. So they get pretty aggressive. Obviously 95% loan to value on a $200,000 house, they're going to loan you up to 190,000 minus your principal mortgage. And so you would have a $90,000 line of credit. So it can be a great resource because you can use it like cash. You can write a check to buy a property. You can write a check to pay for renovations. And you only pay that interest when you've drawn money out of that account. So, I think those are a great option as well. That's pretty accessible for most people if you own any property. Obviously, so you can collateralize other assets, whether that's, I don't want to get too into the weeds on this stuff, but you can collateralize almost any type of asset. So if you own a lot of expensive equipment, you can take debt out against it. If you own vehicles, obviously you can take debt out against it. So one thing I did when I first started is I had a 457B, which is a public employee, or a public employee's version of a 401k. So if you have a 401k, or if you have a 457B, if you're a government employee, you can then borrow money against that from most of the broker managers that run those accounts. So I had like 25,000 or whatever in my account. I was able to borrow out like up to like 75% of that. And I actually used that to bridge the gap between my cash and the cash I needed on a down payment of property. So again, these are just ways to get creative. Obviously, there's all the traditional financing. We don't want to spend too much time on that. But the big one that I think is probably most common and most important right now in the market we're seeing in Q3 going into Q3 of end of Q3 of 2023 is seller financing. Because when you have a property that is either owned outright or has an existing note from a seller, there's an opportunity to have the seller finance that property for you and potentially get better terms than you're going to get from a bank in today's market. Now, if this is mid-size, large-size multifamily, this is much more common. When you get into the small single-family duplexes, triplexes, it's usually a little bit more difficult to get sellers on board for this. But there's a lot of benefits for sellers to do this. One, they're going to get to keep a return on that equity that they have. And so if they don't have a better investment to put that money into, if they sold it outright, then it may make sense for them. And I'll get into that when I talk about this deal I'm working on. It also makes sense for sellers from a tax standpoint, because if you cash out $1 million in equity on a sale, you're going to get hit with a massive tax burden on that sale. If you are able to take that equity and spread it out over a 5, 10, 15, 20-year note, you're then reducing your annual tax basis that you have to pay on. Now you're still taxed on the income from the interest, but as you're paid out the principal of that note, you're being taxed at a lower rate annually than you would be if you were to get it in a lump sum. Now, obviously, there's ways around that. If you're a seller, you can 1031, etc. But if you wanted to sell outright and you're not 1031ing and you don't have a better deal to put it into, seller financing might make a lot of sense from a seller standpoint. There's also loan assumptions, and there's subject to loans. I've heard a lot of people starting to talk about those again. The reason why I feel like in many cases those don't work in our market is because everyone has so much equity, right? So it's like, if you can assume an FHA mortgage on a triplex, let's say, which is usually doable, almost all FHA loans are assumable, but they bought it in 2018 for $100,000 and the market value on it today is $300,000. There's $200,000 in equity, and there's not a lot of benefit of you assuming a $100,000 note on a $300,000 property unless the seller's going to then seller finance the other portion of that equity, right? So if you're buying it for 300, you're assuming a 3% note for 100, and then the seller's going to finance 200 for 5% or whatever. It might make sense for both sides. So there are ways to use both of these strategies. So that's all subject to means. Subject to means you're buying a property subject to the existing mortgage. Now, if they bought this property a year ago and they don't have a ton of equity and they have a 4 or 5% rate instead of a 7 or 8% rate, well, then maybe it makes sense to assume a mortgage that's only a year old, right? Because they didn't gain 50% in equity over the last 3 years like a lot of people did. So there's a time and place where I think subject to and assumptions make sense, but I think it is less, it makes sense in less cases than you will hear people say. And that's always kind of been my issue with it. And I personally never done one, not that I wouldn't, I just haven't ever found a situation where it would have made sense. So back to seller financing, like I said, that's kind of I think probably the main focus of today's conversation is that you will find sellers. If you do enough deals, you do enough marketing, you talk to enough people who are investing in real estate, you will find sellers who not only want to do seller financing, but it makes a ton of sense in their situation. So this 40-unit deal that I'm trying to put together is a deal where the current owner wants to basically retire from management right now. Okay. It's in like a C- area. It's not an easy asset to manage. It's a lot of, kind of difficult tenants, let's put it that way. And so for them, self-managing at retirement age, it's really, really straining, difficult, stressful. Okay. So that's one factor that you want to keep in mind when you're looking at these types of deals. The other factor is they want to be able to outright sell in the next 2 years and probably 1031. So they want a lot of flexibility on executing that final sale where deed actually would transfer, because in a land contract, you don't transfer the title or the deed on the property until you close out the note. So the owner keeps the deed until you satisfy the mortgage that they're giving you. So That then gives them a 24-month window to find a property that might make sense. Now, the second layer of this deal, if it all goes through, is that they probably want to reinvest that money that I'm buying them out of their property with into a larger deal with me, if that makes sense, right? So that's a kind of a caveat to this particular deal is, if they cash out $1 million, well, they want a place to put that money. So obviously it's even more motivation for me to try to make it work, because not only am I buying their 40 units, but then I'm taking the proceeds that they're getting and investing that into like a $5 million deal, let's say, right? So it's helping me scale up in the short term and helping me scale up in the long term if I'm able to execute all of it. The benefit for me as a buyer is they don't want any money up front because they want the interest on the note. So the bigger that note is, the more money they're going to get in return. So they don't want any money up front, which is, benefit. Anytime you can buy money or buy real estate, no money down, that's a good thing, in my opinion. It helps you scale. They also don't want to deal with the management, right? So in the short term, can take over management day one that we close the land contract or the seller financing. And this actually could potentially be a master lease option. I'm not sure. So I still have to work all that out. But the benefit for me is no money down. And I have now a 2-year window or more to then raise the value of this property in an attempt to refinance this with no money into the deal, right? So I'm just going to make numbers up, but let's just say I bought it for $1 million. Normally you would have to bring, 20%, 25% down. Let's just call it 250,000. But if I can buy this building for $1 million, raise the value to 1.5 million, and then get it refinanced for 75% of that new value, I don't have to have any money in the deal when I go to refinance it. Not only would I not have any money in the deal, I could theoretically cash out money as I pay out the initial, or, the original owner or the current owner. So it gives me an opportunity, and it gives me incentive to turn these units, raise the income, improve the property like I do with all of my other properties. So it's more difficult to execute these types of deals because you have to build a really good relationship with that seller. You have to have a level of trust on both sides. But I can guarantee you that there are many, many sellers out there who are in situations like this one where it makes a ton of sense for them to do a deal like this. Because at the end of the day, they're going to get almost the same cash flow that they're getting right now by working almost a full-time job trying to manage this difficult property, by walking away, washing their hands of it, and doing zero work for the same amount of money with no risk, no liability. And then in 2-3 years, whatever, when we close the final sale, they're then also going to walk away with $1 million plus bucks in equity that then they can go reinvest in another deal. So as you can see from a seller's perspective, there can be a lot of upside. And I think for the buyer, there can be a lot of upside as well. But the point of any of these creative deals, whether you're doing private money, hard money, subject to seller finance, lease option, any of that stuff, it has to be a win-win situation. That's what you're trying to create. And at the end of the day, like I said, back to the beginning, all you're really doing is substituting that money in a way that's non-traditional, meaning you're not just saving up 25%, going to the bank saying, hey, give us a loan, and buying it. So it doesn't necessarily matter how you come up with that money, but that is really the difference when you're talking about doing creative financing or creative deal structures. So I know that was a ton of stuff I threw out there. What questions, comments do you guys have?
Joe, one thing you said that was a little bit confusing to me. You said with the seller financing deal, you don't take the ownership until after the note is done. How can you refinance it if you don't take ownership? I thought in creative finance, you took ownership after you did like the down payment, and then there was like an agreement that if you don't make your payments, then they can take ownership back. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
How do you touch that?
so at least obviously every state's going to have a little bit different laws about this, but we're in Ohio. We'll talk about Ohio. So in Ohio, there's a term called a land contract, or an installment sale. It means the same thing. I've heard lawyers and title companies call it different things, but all it means is that the seller is giving you a mortgage on their property. The land contract is the physical document that is like a mortgage clause, and it spells out whatever you guys agree to. I mean, there's some boilerplate stuff that'll be in there, but it basically says, what are you putting down, if anything? What is the sale price? Is the sale price fixed, meaning that it doesn't change? Like, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but like you can build in increases in value. Let's say if you buy year 1, it's this price. If you buy year 10, it's this price, right? So there's ways to structure that in the deal. What's the interest rate? How much are you paying per month? How are you paying? What are you responsible for as the buyer? Are you paying taxes? Are you paying insurance? Are you paying utilities? And in this case, and in most cases, yes, it is like it is as similar to owning it other than taking title. So the only thing you don't actually do is you don't physically take the title to the property until you execute the note. So that could be 6 months, 6 years. That's all negotiable. But it's actually, most people don't know this, but when you buy your house, you don't actually get the deed either. Now it's recorded on the county. It's recorded with the county that you're taking the title, but you don't physically get your deed until you satisfy the mortgage with the bank. Like literally, you pay off your house, the bank sends you a satisfaction of mortgage, and they send you the original deed. Just like when you pay off your car, it's the same thing. If you pay off your car, your lender or the dealer, whoever holds your note, literally sends you the original title. You don't actually get that. You have a copy, but you don't get the original title until you clear your satisfy your note. So it's actually the same thing, but people just don't realize. What's different is that it's not recorded with the county as far as the transfer of sale is not recorded. The land contract in almost all cases is recorded. And it is an official lien too. I mean, it's no different than a regular mortgage. Now in Ohio, unless the laws change, and I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding and what I've experienced personally is that if you put more than 20% down on a land contract, that gives you mortgage rights instead of tenant rights. And what that means is that if I put 20% down on your property, on my purchase of the property, and then I miss a payment or I'm late, and all of the punishments are spelled out on there, just like a mortgage would. Most mortgages say, okay, you got a 15-day grace period, blah, 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 blah. These are the penalties. These are the interest penalties, whatever. That's all spelled out typically on a mortgage and on a land contract. But let's say I fail to pay, right? Mortgage is due or rent's due August 1st. I don't pay it. Well, the owner, the current owner that holds title can then go foreclose on me just like any other bank can. But if I put 19.5% down on that property, let's say it's $1 million, and I put 190,000 down instead of 200,000 down, they only have to evict me. So it's literally eviction court. So it takes 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, and they can evict you, and it would nullify the land contract agreement. So that's the main difference, and that's why a lot of seller financiers who know what they're doing will only let you put 10% down or whatever, 15% down, because once you have 20% equity, you now have mortgage rights instead of tenant rights. So as far as I know, that's not changed at all in Ohio. I've sold and been in that situation. I bought and been in that situation. And every time I've done that, that clause was specifically spelled out in that contract, whether they're putting, plus or minus 20%. So, but yeah, you do not take title until you satisfy that note, like a traditional sale, and the transfer is not recorded until you satisfy that note.
Can you still refinance even though you don't have title though?
Yeah, it's actually technically a refinance. It is, because the land contract is a note. So let's say this deal happens, right? And our target date is December of 25. That's what we're kind of looking at as far as the sale or refinance. I will technically be refinancing it because I am satisfying his note, existing note. So he has a very small note with his bank. I'm satisfying that first position lien. I'm satisfying his second position lien on the property that is against me. And then I'm also getting the new note and starting the new, the final sale, starting the actual taking title, all that stuff. But basically that new bank just becomes, the first position lien, and we're getting rid of 1 and 2. And so, yeah, it is actually, I mean, you can call it a sale. You go to the title company, you sign, you get a deed, you get a HUD. I mean, it's like a normal closing, but it's technically a refinancing because you're actually just satisfying one mortgage or two in this case and going to a new one. And so, like, the main difference from my understanding with a lease option or master lease option is that I am getting control of the property of the asset through a lease, like a straight up, like, it's not going to be the same language, but literally the lease we give our tenants, I am signing a lease that stipulates what I pay and what I'm responsible for, what my rights are, what my rights aren't. But it is not a recorded land contract. And I think the main difference to my understanding is I don't start my cost basis and my depreciation schedule with the IRS until that option is exercised because I'm a tenant. I am not a borrower. And that little distinction, I think, is the main difference. And again, I don't quote me on that. I haven't. All this is stuff I'm working through right now with the CPA and the lawyers and all that stuff. But it's like my understanding and my ignorance is that those are the two main differences. It's like, I'm not getting to start my 27.5 year depreciation until I either execute a recorded land contract or exercise my option to buy on a master lease. So for me as a buyer, I think a land contract is probably a better deal, and that gives me more rights. Because same thing with tenants' rights, right? Like we just talked about, master lease option, you don't pay your rent, you're a victim, and that's going to be well defined. Now, I'm not saying that the lease is going to default to like landlord laws. You can spell out, hey, I got 30 days late to pay. This is my penalty. I got 60 days late. You can, I mean, just like in every other aspect of real estate, everything's negotiable, right? Whatever you guys agree to is the law of the land within reason. But if you don't have that specific language spelled out, then literally it's like, okay, you didn't pay on the first, I can give you 3-day notice and take you to court. And then you lose all your rights. So like it puts the seller in a good position too, because if I go through and buy this and I put blood, sweat, and tears, sweat equity, and my money into this because I'm in control of this property now, and I put 100 grand into it and I raise the value of this property by 300,000 and then I default, they get the asset back and I get nothing. So, they're in a really good spot. And it's like, I'm on the other side of that with my lease options. It's like, my best situation in my lease options is my tenants don't buy it out or quit paying. Like I'm going to make way more money if my tenants quit paying or don't exercise their option, because the way my deals are set up, they're getting a really good deal because we locked in this price, right? I know I've talked about my lease options on here before, but they're going to screw themselves by not paying or not exercising their option. Yeah, John. Yeah, to your comment. Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is what's frustrating as an investor and as a buyer, is like you try to explain this to people. 99% of the people out there, common, mom and pop investors, do not understand any of this stuff that we're talking about, right? And so you start talking all this stuff, and they get deer in the headlights or just tune you out, and they're like, no, I want my money, and so that tells me two things. If that happens, and it's happened to me many, 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 many times, you're either not trustworthy for whatever reason, and not necessarily you're as a person aren't trustworthy, but meaning you haven't built the right rapport, you haven't built the right relationship, you haven't built the right trust. Either one, or two, you're not explaining it well. Because if you can't articulate this stuff and explain it effectively to where an average person can understand it, what happens when we don't understand something, right? We fear it. That's just common human nature. So you're not going to be successful in doing these types of deals if you can't get the other counterpart to be comfortable, trusting, and understanding of what's happening. And they have to understand the benefit for them. And so it's like at this point in my investing career, I'm almost like blinders on to my position. Like I try not even to look at my point of view anymore. Like Like that's super hindsight in a deal. I am like almost solely focused on like what's in it for them, put myself in their shoes, operate completely out of like being in their position, because that's how deals are done. Because if I'm operating 95% out of their shoes and out of their point of view and what's in it for them and how can I benefit them, that is ultimately going to lead me to being more successful in closing more deals. And I'm not saying to, do something stupid for yourself and put yourself in a bad position. All I'm saying is that when I was a new investor, it was always me, me, me. What's in it for me? How can I win this situation? How can I benefit? And I think that's just human nature. We're all kind of narcissistic. We're all kind of self-centered. A lot of investors are. That's something that as a person, as you grow older and wiser, you have to constantly battle and try to fight that inner ego and that inner narcissist. And we all have that. But I think as you get more experienced and successful as an investor, you start seeing that when you're looking at it strictly from your point of view, it's going to limit so many opportunities you have because, it's not always win-lose, and I think rarely is it win-lose. It's almost always either lose-lose or a little win-win. I know there's a funny saying and I agree with it. It's like, if both people at the closing table aren't a little bit unhappy, then nobody won. You know what I mean? That's kind of like, that's just the way most real estate deals feel. Buyers feel like they got screwed, sellers feel like they got screwed. And you don't want it, like, as a buyer or a seller, I don't want it to be one-sided. Obviously not against me, certainly not against me. And I don't want it to be, I don't want to feel like I took advantage of somebody or that, I had to win every single aspect of a deal. Like it should be a win-win. And so anyway, I kind of got on a tangent there, but the point being that it's, I think when you open your perspective to that and try to operate from their point of view, it's going to help you be a lot more successful as an investor. I mean, and in life. I mean, I think that applies to almost anything in life, but certainly in real estate. What other questions you guys got?
I know I read a book by Bill Ham called Creative Cash. And actually I reached out to him on Instagram, and me and Angelo actually ended up having like an hour to talk with him about this stuff, which was really cool. In order to I was trying to source these deals, so I was just calling real estate agents. And it's funny, like 9 out of 10, the second I even said like, what's the motivation, or are they open to seller financing, it was like the deer in the headlights thing, and they were just like, we don't do that here, and just hang up. Like some really bad responses on that. But there was a few that were open to it. So
well, and part, so like from my agent perspective, whenever I hear that, more often than not, it tells me somebody's calling and saying, hey, I want to buy a bunch of real estate, but I have no money. And
yeah,
that's the way that a lot of agents are going to take that. So don't take it personal, but I guarantee you that was their thought going through their head, right?
right.
And we talk about these things every week. It's like you have to have something of value to be effective in real estate. So that's either capital. That's the easiest thing. I think that's the easiest thing for anyone to have or get. You have to have some sort of niche or nuanced experience or skill set that's going to separate you from everyone else. You have to have knowledge. You have to have inside information that no one else has. Like Gage, I know you always talk about the development plans. Like that is a secret weapon. If you can get really good at that and you can find the deals that no one else knows about, or I was funny enough, side note, I was talking to one of my buddies who's a cop, not a real estate guy, but this is the prime example. About, I don't know when this was, 5-6 years ago, right? He wanted to buy his first primary residence, just a regular primary residence, and he literally read in the newspaper, or the City Beat magazine or newspaper, whatever, Cincinnati's thing, where they were talking about city council was meeting to discuss neighborhoods that they were going to start doing redevelopment and investing in, like you've talked to us about. And one of those that popped up was Madisonville. So this is before not a single development in Madisonville had started, commercial, real estate, otherwise. And so he literally read through this article. There was like 5 neighborhoods that they were discussing, where they're going to start doing this, community investment fund thing. And he's like, you know what? I like the East Side. I work over there. He's in District 2 at the time as a Cincinnati cop. I'm going to buy a house in Madisonville. And I just hope, I hope I'm the one picked, right? But it's like just that little step, that 10-minute article he read made him hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity in his house. Just that one little tidbit of inside information. So again, it was literally, I had talked to him 2 hours ago, coincidentally, and that's what we were talking about. But it's like, that's just one example, a real life example of like, if you're willing, you have to do something to set yourself apart. Like, no offense to anyone out there that has a ton of money. But it's like, I don't want to offend anybody, but it's like, those are the people I respect least in the business. And what I'm going to clarify what I mean by that is that when I talk to people who have hundreds and hundreds of doors, it's like, well, how did you get that? Well, I sold my tech company and I made $20 million and then I bought hundreds of doors. It's like, okay, well, that's cool. And that's great. And that's a great investment. But it's like anybody could have done that. It took zero talent. It took zero skill. If you have money, you can buy real estate, right? So it's like, again, I'm not trying to diminish that. And there's no disrespect to those people. All I'm saying is that, like, personally, when I meet somebody who came from nothing and they had $0 in their pocket and they built a massive portfolio through just sheer hard work and talent and skills, those are the people that I have the most admiration for, because I know it's the hardest journey. I know it's so difficult. And so again, I hopefully am not offending anybody who may watch this, but it's like, buying 100 doors or 1,000 doors because you have millions of dollars is the least difficult aspect of any sort of real estate investing. And so anyway, what else? Comments, questions? If you guys done any sort of creative deals at all that anyone else want to chime in on?
I did
Yeah,
wonder how you
Go ahead,
resource it.
Angela.
yes, the one comment that I was gonna make is that I've been personally trying to generate some leads. I guess that's what I'm struggling with. But literally just going on the county records, trying to find information, and like you said, trying to find those smaller landlords, getting their contact info and trying to reach out. That's what I'm doing right now, and it may not be that larger scale. But and I've already, made a couple of contacts, and now it's just a matter of trying to build that trust, right? I don't know if anything's gonna end up happening. Hopefully something works out. But personally, I'm trying to get a few of those reps in, get more comfortable with the process, get more comfortable with building that trust, that relationship with some of these people, because like you said, and I haven't even mentioned creative financing, right? It's more of like, hey, are you interested? Really trying to understand they own the property outright, or if there's a mortgage, what their motivation really is. But that's personally what I've been doing. And like you said, I think right now it is important to start focusing on some of those out of the box strategies versus the MLS. Hopefully we can find something of the MLS, right? But it's hard to make them pencil out right now.
Right. Well, and one thing I want to mention is, like, keep in mind that just because you're doing seller financing doesn't mean it has to be way different than like a bank deal. Like, if you have 20-25% down, it might make a lot of sense to put that money down. The benefit of seller financing, even in that case, is that so I'll shout out to Dylan Koch. You guys all know Dylan. He's spoken here before. Dylan has done a couple deals this year where he bought at market price. He gave the seller exactly what they wanted. Now, these were off market leads. He does his direct mail or direct marketing thing that he talked about. But it's like, this wasn't crazy. Like, it was straight up just a normal sale. But the difference was, he went to the seller and said, "Hey, look, I'm going to make numbers up. I can't give you $300,000 for this 4-family because interest rates are 7% or whatever they were at the time. It makes no sense. But I can give you your number if you're willing to give me a 5-year, 3% interest loan. I'll refi it out in 5 years, and I'll give you full price, everything you want. And I'll even give you 25% down right now or whatever, right? I don't know the details, but you know what I'm getting at is like, all he switched on that was paying 3% interest instead of 7%. But that made the deal work, right? I mean, you know, I'm sure you guys all underwrite deals. You know what I'm talking about. Do the math on a deal right now where everything's the same, but you go from 7 to 3% interest. I guarantee you're going to double or triple your cash flow just off that single, you know, factor. So there's ways to do this where it doesn't have to be some big, you know, massive complicated thing like I'm trying to do, right? Like what I'm trying to do is like complicated even for me. But it's like it could be like Dylan, you know, simple. Hey, I'll give you your number, but I need this. Yes or no? You know, it's something that simple.
Yeah.
But if for the seller, if that's the difference of 225,000 at 7% interest or 300,000 at 3% interest, it might make a lot of sense. Because if you do the math, at the end of the day, you're paying that money either way, right? You're either paying 75,000 extra in interest over however many years, or you're paying them 75,000 up front in equity on the sale. So I mean, it's like if you can give the seller what they want, Angelo, especially like, you know, you're starting to build these relationships, that's the way to do it. And your approach, from what you're saying, sounds great. Like, build that relationship first, and then see where it goes. And like, and I, you know, I've talked about this before, but the reason why I do this group is, one, you know, I like to have an excuse to get together with you guys and talk real estate, but also I want to meet more people. You know, if we can get this group to, you know, 10, 20, 30 consistent people. I mean, and I don't want to get too big because there's an intimacy of like having a small group where you actually know people and have relationships. I don't want 100 people or 1,000 people in here. That's not what I want. But if we could get 10, 20, you know, core people in here that we see every 2 weeks, building those relationships leads to good things. And that's my motivation. You know, I don't charge money for this. I don't make any money from doing this. But my motivation is I'm going to meet new investors. I'm going to meet potential clients. I'm going to meet potential partners. I'm going to meet potential sellers, lenders, whatever, right? I'm networking, I'm learning, and I'm building those relationships for the future. You know, this is all an investment and all of our own futures, right? I mean, and look at the things we've done. You know, Angelo's bought a deal, DJ bought a deal, John's bought a deal. So just the 9 months or whatever we've been doing this, we've been able to put so many cool things together. And obviously, you know, that's what I want for anybody who's in this group. So it's but back to your point, Angelo, it's like these are the things you guys should be doing in your world, right? You know, because we have this group and we have all these other, like, you know, real estate groups we're in. But eventually, as you grow as an investor, you're going to kind of create your own little aura, your own little orbit of your group. And it's not going to all just be real estate guys and gals. You know, it's going to be people you work with. It's going to be family members. It's going to be people you grew up with. It's going to be people at your church or whatever, right? You're going to create your own little orbit that then allows you to grow your network and find opportunities, whether that's, you know, real estate deals or lenders or partners or whatever, right? All these things we're talking about, mentors, you know, whatever. So there's a lot of value in just strictly building relationships. And it doesn't, you know, I don't think you don't want to look at it from a perspective of like a transactional type of value, right? It's not like, I don't want to look at this and be like, okay, there's Gage. Okay, what can I get out of Gage? How can Gage help me? What can Gage do for me? Like, if you have that point of view, and I think a lot of investors do, especially new ones. And again, back to the things we talked about, right? It's the narcissist, it's the ego, it's all these, it's a natural human thing to be, you know, kind of resource dominant, whatever you want to call it, right? It's like this is our caveman brain that never is going to go away. It's something you have to manage. So it's like when you naturally get away from that and you organically build relationships with people, you start to see all the benefits of that happening by just strictly, you know, it's almost, I don't know how to explain it. It's like, just be a good person. And I know that sounds like kind of crazy, but it's like, just be a good person and good things will happen. And that's what I've tried to do, you know, all of my life, but certainly, you know, the last 8 years I've been in real estate. And yeah, anyway, I lost my train of thought on the point there, but hopefully that makes sense.
Angela, did you read Peyton Corby's book? I think I did that last time we were in here. Maybe that was
Yeah,
somebody.
it's the wealth without cash, and it's all right. I mean, I think I have a couple of chapters left, but there's a couple of chapters that talk about building relationships, right? And that's kind of what I mean, we kind of knew this, right? Because we've been all trying to network as much as we can. So those specific chapters were pretty decent. But I would say that everything else were things that we all know just from all of the content that we consume and all of the meetups that we go. So would I recommend it to the group? No. But for someone that doesn't really know much about seller financing at all or what the subject to even mean, then it's a pretty decent read.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Compared to the cash, creative cash, and how much of it was overlapping. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, and, you know, that makes me think of something I think about all the time now. It's like, you know, when I look at my 8-year trajectory and my journey in real estate, those first couple years, like 2015, 2016, I was heavily in like, I want to digest every bit of real estate information that there is. Now, there wasn't nearly as much information as there is now. You know, it's like almost overwhelming now. Everybody's got a podcast, everybody's got a mastermind, everybody's got a group, a YouTube, whatever, right? You know, I mean, it's almost like you're inundated with like, you know, information all the time, 24/7. You know, back, you know, 8 years ago, like bigger pockets had the one podcast. They had the forums, and there was like a handful of real estate books out, and that was it, right? So it was kind of easily digestible to know what everyone else knows at the time. Um, but as I've been down this path and this journey, it's like after a couple years, if you're really putting your heart and soul into it, and I know you guys are, that's why you guys are here every other week. Um, you're going to hit a point where it's like you kind of know what there is to know. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are kind of starting to get to that point. You're feeling that, like, you know, especially if you've had a couple properties and you've been in this a couple years, you're going to get to that point where it's like you may not have experienced everything there is. And I don't, you know, I don't think you ever will, but it's like you, from a conceptual standpoint, you understand what there is to understand about real estate. And then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I've done that. Now what? And that's, I think, the hardest part, because then it forces you to look at yourself in a mirror and say, okay, I had no excuses anymore. Why am I not doing X, Y, or Z? And it becomes more of like a fundamental issue than a fear or lack of knowledge issue. Um, and so I've just seen all these kind of phases as I've gone through. And when I look back, when I meet new investors, when I meet new clients, you know, whatever relationship I have with that person, I can see where they're at, and I can remember when I was there, and I see what they're dealing with. And it's so funny because it's like now, whatever, you know, however many years into this, it's like I don't care about any of the like tactical stuff at all. I don't care about, you know, deal analysis or like any of that stuff. I care about the broad, like kind of metadata of the market. That's what I care about. Like I'm looking at like what are the gross trends happening nationally, regionally, locally? Like that's to me what actually matters. That to me is what's impacting my decisions. Because again, you know, like I don't need to know how to like house hack a duplex or whatever, right? You know, it's like you're just going to keep escalating your knowledge base and your experience level, and then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I just need information to make decisions. I don't need like knowledge. You know, hopefully that makes sense what I'm trying to explain. But you guys will see that progression as you continue investing and growing. Um, and so yeah, I mean, and it's cool, you know, obviously I've known you guys now for a little while. It's like I see where all of you're at, and you're all at like different points. And obviously when we look at like the bigger group and, you know, the guys that have come in and out of here, it's like I've seen where everyone is and where they're going, and you know, it's very reflective of, you know, my path and some of the experiences I had to go through. All right, cool. Any other questions, comments about anything creative financing? Hopefully that was helpful for anyone who's been considering it. And just quickly to one thing I didn't mention on Angelo's comment is like when you're looking at specific properties you want to go after, what I have found to be most effective is when you're able to look for those elderly landlords that are trying to retire. So like when I was pulling lists and I was doing my cold calling or cold texting and all that stuff, I had one whole dedicated list just to elderly landlords, meaning someone who's owned a property 30, 20, 30, 40 years, people that have paid off properties, those are things you can try to scrub data for. Because just like this 40 unit I'm trying to buy, same situation. This guy wants to retire. That's his primary motivation. If he didn't want to retire, if he wasn't of his age, probably wouldn't, that conversation wouldn't have gone anywhere. So it just, when you think of all the benefits that we've talked about tonight of seller financing from a seller's point of view, almost all of them coincide with someone who is, older, owned a property a long time, can't mentally, physically, whatever, deal with it. They don't trust management. They don't trust realtors. They want to sell it off market. They want to sell it without an agent. All those kind of things coincide with like the older generation, right? So hopefully that's a target for you guys if you decide to pursue some of these deals. All right, cool. If there's nothing else, then let's get into the goal updates. And DJ, you want to start us off?
Sure. So on the personal side, the ones that I've hit since last meeting, getting kids involved in entrepreneurship. I just had an apartment or one of my duplex units turned and brought my daughter up there and had her help me clean and stuff. And we actually, I brought her down to the Montgomery place and we cleaned garbage out of the restaurant last weekend. So getting her into that, and then she giving her some money so she can earn on that. I just finished a book called Prepared by Mike Glover. I heard it on a podcast. It was probably the first non real estate or wealth book, but it's about like prepping and how to be prepared and stuff. It was really good. It was a quick read, but I'm going to start The One Thing by Gary Keller. I've had that recommended like 100 times, so I'm going to start that one either tonight or tomorrow. A town on a Jeep trip in the morning, so I'll be out of town. Trying to figure out some new business investing related goals, since we're working on the apartment. I'm not going to buy anything new this year, so that's got me. But I registered for Asha's Invest Beyond Multifamily conference, so that'll be good. And then I'd like to find another one, either local or national, to kind of attend here. I'm doing horrible on social media, so I'm still going to try to get back into that. But yeah, other than that, everything else is rolling along. The apartment's going great. Found an architect and keep that rolling along.
Awesome. Yeah, One Thing, great book. I'm kind of a book hater, not a book hater, but like the people that like you said, you get 100 recommendations for it, and I read it, I'm like kind of like, meh, it was a little overhyped. But like One Thing is legit. It is a very good at helping you focus on that very simple concept of the next thing, the one thing.
I definitely need that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of those books too where it's like I think you read it every year, because it really just helps reinforce it, helps beat it into your brain. And it's probably been a few years for me. I need to read it again too.
Cool.
All right, Angela.
Hey, what was the name of that book again?
The One Thing by Gary Keller.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. So I've been kind of all over the place recently, and I'm also struggling with the social media too, right? I haven't really been active at all. I had a few weeks where I was going at it pretty hard, and then just life got busy. Not an excuse, right? Because you can always make time for these things, but it hasn't really been a priority. I just need to make it a priority, right? Um, but like I said, just trying to build those relationships, trying to find, utilize some type of creative financing. But not only that, I think really the other advantage is just not having, 5, 10 other people trying to buy that same deal, right? Because let's be honest, that's anytime you see something in Norwood, right? And you know it's gonna go. You look at the number of saves and views within the first few hours, and it's already over 100. So you know that unless you overpay for one of those deals, you are not gonna get it. So really try to beat the competition by doing it, direct to seller, right? So trying to build those relationships. Again, that's why I was reading the Pace Morby book, and which I've been struggling a little bit with my reading. I wanted to read one book a month. I'm a couple of books behind right now. I will be catching up. But the one thing that I realized that I stopped doing was tracking, right? Really tracking on a weekly basis and making sure that I keep those tasks in front of me and checking the boxes. So I started doing that again. That's really helping me. And I added a couple more things that I really needed to start doing, like drinking more water. I know it's not real estate related, but really drinking more water and then really tracking my meditation, um, which I was kind of doing, but not really tracking it. And then hopefully a couple more units by the end of this year. The my 2 tenants, everything's cash flowing, everything's doing well, so no complaints over there. Savings are on track. We'll be exceeding those. Things are going really well at work. Um, so no complaints there. I guess that's kind of how they keep you in the rat race too, right? But I like my job, so I'm not complaining. It's not too bad. It's pretty easy actually. But no, it's a good job. Um, but yeah, that's what I've been up to. And then DJ, sounds like you're gonna miss our meetup tomorrow, but hopefully I'll see some of you out there, you Gage maybe. And just trying to network as much as I can.
Awesome, man. Gage.
Yeah, I'll be there. You know, um, so my tenants moved out August 31st. My first set of tenants that I got, they're on a 6-month lease. They moved out, and I went in, checked it out, and it was nearly just as spotless as it was when I handed it over to them. So that was great. I'm gonna miss having them as tenants because they were great tenants. But I guess that's how it works, right? They're gonna move out sooner or later unless they do what some of yours do and buy it. Um, so now I'm working on getting that rented out. I've had some people tour it. I haven't been since I'm out here in Cincinnati and it's all the way out in Batesville. I haven't been as active as I could be, I guess, as I was before because I was living there at showing it. Um, and it seems like whenever I schedule people to see it, if I do it anywhere longer than 3 days ahead, they just don't show up. Like it's got to be 3 days or less, or the people that I'm scheduling like a weekend ahead just won't show up. So kind of like figuring that strategy out of how to schedule it so that they show up. So it's top of their mind. Um, so just trying to get that leased out. At this property here, still getting the plumbing done. I had a little hold up. I needed to submit a permit to put a wall up, a wet wall, and he wasn't going to do it. So I had to do it. So I had to like create my renderings and everything and make sure all of that was legitimately measured. So I did all that on some like Adobe thing, and I submitted that today. But they told me to just come back tomorrow because I guess they have in between certain times you can get it done day of, and I guess it was past that time today. So I'm gonna go in there and hopefully get that tomorrow, so the plumber can get this done. Um, the financing on this has changed. I was just recently told that there's now going to be a 6-month period, seasoning period, which wasn't the case before with the specific bank I was working with. But he said there might be, I don't know, we'll see on that. But even if that's the case, that would put me at November to cash out refi on this one to use the money for another one after that. I'm also filling out an FHA loan pre-application so I can maybe utilize an FHA loan and get somewhere maybe a little nicer. I've been looking at the east side. I'd love to get in somewhere around Norwood, and get into something that's not as in need of a lot of tunnel work like the ones that I've been buying. In terms of personal stuff, one thing that whenever I was in Africa that I really reflected on is just intentionally spending time with friends and people you care about. So one of my goals for this month is to intentionally take out 3+ either friends or family members, just one-on-one for a lunch or for a dinner, just to catch up and just spend time. Phone down, just really spend that time. That's something that I want to be more intentional about. Attend one meetup I've never been to. I'm going to be attending on the 13th. There's a meetup here in Cincy. Can't remember what it's called. Maybe CRE Investor Network. Jared Sturham. I don't know, Joe, if you know who that is. He's a big investor here in Cincinnati. I know he's a part of it. So I think it's more of a commercial thing. But I think it's free. And it's on the 13th. If anyone's interested in going, I'll be there. I have a goal to learn a new song on my piano. Still working towards getting in shape for the marathon. And I need to find a new CPA. My tax preparer actually passed away. So I need to find a new one that can hopefully give me some good strategies for my real estate going forward. So that's it.
Yeah, Phil Weichert is a great CPA. Most people in this group and probably know him, but I can certainly introduce you. He's a really good dude. He's been doing my stuff for years. I'll send you his email.
I remember he was on here before.
Yes, yeah, Phil talked to us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good dude.
I was just gonna say, well, Joe, obviously you've known him for a long time, but the way that I was able to reach him was go through the website and you can actually schedule time with him. And they got some other people at work, obviously at the office too, right? But I had a conversation with them and they're very knowledgeable, very reasonable, the pricing standpoint too. I was expecting a lot more, but they're pretty reasonable. They really seem to know what they're doing. So I'm looking forward to sending them my paperwork in a few months.
DJ,
Yeah.
thanks for they just sent me his contact. So
Nice. Yeah.
quick on
Yeah.
the girl.
He's a good dude and knows his stuff. Saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. So the only problem is that he's very good and successful, so he's really busy, like anyone else that's good at what they do. So that's the only downside I would give him is that he's very busy. Like Angela said, you got to schedule time with him to get in there. But all right, cool. John?
Yeah, so I think I determined that my headset was the cause of the robotic sound for the past few weeks.
Nice.
So I got a new one here. Yeah, so as far as like goals, I've kind of did, I guess, all I can do this year, for the most part. I got my busy season coming November, December, which is like my tax season. So I got, 10+ hour days. So I may not be able to do anything at the end of this year. I just got back from Texas on a personal note. I'm thinking about moving there. It's much more affordable than South Florida. I was looking at 3-car garages and stuff. So after my wedding next year, I plan on moving out there. I'd say it's probably comparable in pricing to where you guys live, just from looking at the single family homes and stuff. South Florida, so many people have moved here. It's gotten astronomical. You got to pay 7, 8, 900,000 for a starter home that's decent. But yeah, as far as real estate goals, I'm open to anything, possibly even again early next year, or even if I can find something this year, I just won't have that much time towards the end of the year. As far as like fitness goals and stuff, I've been getting in shape a little more and more. Earned my first stripe at jujitsu on my belt, and then yesterday I broke my finger in class. So I was like, here we go. A few steps forward and one step back. But yeah, no, can't complain. I just got the first check, Joe, first rent. Labor Day, both tenants paid. So they had a few questions. They emailed about the transition from the former management company to mine, because I guess the former management company never took them out of the automatic email thing. So it's saying your balance is due, and they were like, "What? I paid." So good learning experience, and no complaints there. And still, I'm reading the Lean Startup. It's not about real estate, so just about business in general. Because when I started like an Amazon business that flopped a few years ago, I think I went too big too soon, and this is more about kind of like beta testing a product first, see what the market reacts to it, and then go from there rather than spending thousands up front on inventory. So the Lean Startup is what I've been reading. And I have yet to read the one thing, but so many people have recommended that to me as well.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Congrats on getting your first rent check. That's definitely a kind of revelationary experience. I remember it. Yeah, that's awesome, man. All right, cool. So yeah, for me, I am making progress on all of our apartments. I think I mentioned we had like 3 vacancies kind of come up pretty quickly on my Eastgate buildings. Got those all renovated and leased out. So that's worked out pretty good. We might have one that we're waiting on them to move in. I'm not sure, but I know 2 of them already leased up and moved in, so that went pretty quick. Finally was able to submit my permits to the city on the 2 apartments they wanted permits on at Clifton. So still waiting on approval for that. That's been like a couple month process, so pain in the butt. But we have a few other apartments there we're renovating as well right now. And then I have several large rehab projects going on, so those are all going progressing pretty well. And then like I said, just literally today walked that 40 unit, started that due diligence process. So next couple of weeks I'll be working on underwriting and working through all the very specific details of what this deal looks like for buyer and seller, and kind of the end game on that. So obviously when I have more finalized information, I'll be sharing that deal with the group. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We had a baby a month ago. I'm sure most of you know. So she's doing well on the personal side. Messed my ankle up pretty bad about a month ago as well. So I haven't been playing basketball, and that's been kind of bumming me out, because it just gives me more time to work and be with my family, I guess. But yeah, no, I was doing good, chugging along, doing like 3 days a week of basketball. So I missed that. Real estate markets, obviously, as you all know, been pretty slow. So I have a few listings up, but the sales side has been pretty slow. So I've just been focusing my time on building out my construction business. We've gotten into doing a lot more bigger projects, which is cool. That's kind of what my goal was with my GC company. And something I'm heavily looking at is getting into new construction as well. So we got some potential clients we might do new builds for, and we may even do some like build to rent or build to sell developments next year. So I'm kind of working through that process of the logistics of it. But I think that would be a cool avenue in the market we're in. I think there's still a lot of demand for new builds and for build to rent, trying to build, I wouldn't call it affordable housing, but somewhat affordable housing, and help fill some of that supply issue that we have here in Cincinnati. So yeah, I think that's all the stuff I'm working on. Appreciate you guys all coming. I know, as all of you probably know, we have our in-person meetup. I'm going to be hosting on the 15th at 6 p.m. at my house. So I know, John, you're out of town, but hopefully all of you local guys can make it. So that'll be at my house, 6 p.m. It should be a pretty good group. I know we have like 10 people from another real estate group who are all based in California, but they're all coincidentally in town that weekend. So we're going to meet their groups coming to meet up with us as well. So it'll be a good way to kind of commingle and again, feel free to bring their wives or girlfriends if they're even remotely interested, or just want to come and have a drink and hang out. Either way, I don't want to feel like they're excluded. They just may be bored by all the nerdy real estate stuff we're talking about, but hopefully they can join you guys as well. Any final thoughts, closing questions or comments? Cool. I know. So I spoke to Ash recently that DJ was talking about with his conference coming up, and he offered to come talk to our group as well. So we'll figure out a time here in the next couple calls to get him in here to talk about some commercial real estate, tell us a little bit more about his story and background. So I'm sure most of you know who he is. He's obviously one of the more well-known investors here in Cincinnati as well. So yeah, looking forward to having him on and share with us. And if you guys know anybody else who's interested in learning about more about real estate, feel free to invite them to our group. You should be able to share that link or send me their name. I'm happy to add them because I'd love to get some new blood in here that maybe is scared of real estate and wants to learn more. And I think that our group has a good mix of experience that would be helpful for brand new investors, or obviously more experienced investors. So keep that in mind if you guys know anybody in your worlds that may want to learn. And I think doing it, even though we meet virtually, obviously, I think it's a little easier to not be so gun shy when you're not having to walk into a room with 100 people and try to shake hands. And so if you know some introverted new investors, maybe they would have a little bit more comfort here. Cool. All right, if there's nothing else, we'll see you guys on the 15th, and keep on moving with your goals.
Awesome. Thanks all.
All right, guys.
See you guys.
Take care.